Winnebago County for the started across the forest preserves really in earnest about 6 years ago, but well before that with bluebird monitoring, probably 15 years ago or so. So the bluebird nest monitoring you'll see over in the far left screen. And if you want to pick anyone's brain, Don Miller actually started as a bluebird monitor this year, which was very exciting. So a little bit about kind of how this all came to be. The forest preserves of Winnebago County, Kim O'Malley, the volunteer coordinator, and Jamie Johansson started doing a few different community science programs in an effort to get people out on the forest preserves. And the more I got involved with it, it was okay. It was like, yes, we want to get people out, but we want people collecting good data and collecting lots of it, because Winnebago County is in kind of an interesting situation in that there are a lot of things that we know, so things that we have seen. Oh yeah, I remember seeing that out in my grandpa's field or out in my backyard, but there's not necessarily county records documented for a lot of species because we don't have a large university doing research in our county. So we don't have the same kind of records as DeKalb does, or many of the colored counties, because we don't have those big universities doing research in our area. And so the community science programs have really served to fill those holes. And we've had a lot of county records documented in the last 6 or 7 years of species that, oh yeah, we know they're here, but there's never been any official documentation for them. And just in the last 2 years, we've added AmeriCorps to the mix as well. So for those that aren't familiar, AmeriCorps is basically like the Peace Corps, but instead of serving abroad, they're serving in the States. So we're in our 2nd year of AmeriCorps members, actually just getting ready to start our 3rd, and they're absolutely amazing. We've had some folks that are locals that have chosen to serve. So Jillian Neese, who is our current AmeriCorps member supporting community science, is actually a Hononegah grad. I'm sure Don can root on that one with pride as a fellow Hononegah grad, but she's been absolutely amazing in supporting community science. But we've had members that have come as far away as New York. We had a guy from Indiana this summer. So a lot of great, mostly young folks, so in their early to mid 20s typically, that are interested in doing public service. And so the 3 of these organizations combined have really joined forces to really improve community science in our area. So what exactly is community science? So you've got a group of people that have a particular characteristic in common. Science, so obviously systematic knowledge of the world gained through observation. You will see multiple terms used for community science. So it started out as citizen science. You've got volunteer environmental monitoring, crowdsourced science, community-based science, community-based participatory research, and my personal favorite is the public participation in scientific research, which is not a term that I think anyone really engages with. But you'll see that mostly in research papers. A little bit of the history of community science. It actually started in the United States with Audubon and the Great Christmas Bird Count. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that story, and that Christmas was a good time to go hunt birds. And there were a number of folks that said, you know what, how about we just go try and find birds for conservation? And it was done in partnership with the Chautauqua movement, which was the nature study movement of the United Methodist Church. So we've got, I think we're at year 120, I don't even know now, 22 years, 123 years now of the Great Christmas Bird Count. So we are way up there in many, many decades of collecting scientific data, and it's only branched out from there. So what does community science look like? It varies from program to program, but involves monitoring. So whether you're out collecting data, recording your finding, and sharing the results. There are a number of different programs. So if you're really into astronomy, you can actually go onto Zooniverse and you can help sort the Hubble Space Telescope images. So they have an online training for how to classify different types of galaxies and stars. And they've got millions of images, and NASA doesn't have any way to do that through an algorithm per se. So they've got people that are out there helping classify, and they're duplicating those images so that multiple people are looking at the same image. So that repetitive thing increases the accuracy of your data.
And
you've also got.
Anne, can I stop for a second?
Sure.
Are you sharing your screen? Can you share your screen?
Oh, I was. Sorry. I thought I was.
Okay.
Thank you for. Apologies. I've been going through the slides thinking I'm sharing them. All right. Ah, there we go. Much better. Apologies. All right. So why is community science important? There's so many reasons, because community science looks like there's so many different models it looks like. So it contributes information to researchers and land managers, teaches the community about nature, and empowers community to be stewards of nature. And that's just for biological community science. You can get into water quality, you can get into geology and erosion. You're finding more and more environmental justice community science programs around water quality, especially in low-income communities of color. People are sick of getting dumped on, so they're doing what they can to collect the data to empower change. So it really does have broad-reaching impact and opportunities for data, because I mean, more and more data is how decisions get made in ways I don't think ever before, all because of this little device right here that allows people to collect data just about anywhere. So a little bit about the community science programs. One of the most exciting things, and this happened a couple of years ago, the Forest Preserves of Winnebago County actually received a $100,000 grant from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for habitat restoration, specifically for the rusty patch bumblebee. And this was, and most of you may be aware of this, but the rusty patch bumblebee was recently listed as a federally endangered species. So that was about 2.5 years ago now. And Winnebago County and northern Illinois and southern Wisconsin are turning out to be kind of the hub for what's left of this population. And so there is a lot of funding to help support habitat restoration to hopefully get this species to recover. And fortunately, the habitat that they need, there are a lot of other bees and pollinators that need the same habitat requirements. So once we can advocate and restore for this species, we can do the same for a number of other species. We have a little over 1,700 species documented on Inaturalist, and this is just for Winnebago County, which is pretty fascinating. So this is plants, insects, fungi, mammals, birds, everything. And the beauty of community science, especially when you're using Inaturalist, is you don't need to have any idea what you're looking at. The Inaturalist has a feature that will allow you to, or will suggest an identification for you. And then there's people that get really excited by helping others identify, that will go through images, they'll go through sounds, because you can actually upload audio recordings now as well. So if there's that really obnoxious bird that you're like, I hear this bird all the time and I have no idea what it is, you can record the sound and upload it to Inaturalist and have somebody help you identify it, which is just amazing. Especially as a transplant myself, who's still learning a lot of the biology of the area, I find it endlessly useful when I see a new plant or a new fungus or something that I'm like, I have no idea what this is. I'll just INAT it and it's right there. We've got over 800 hours, and that's just this year, between all of the different community science programs and the City Nature Challenge, which Don mentioned and I'll mention a little later. We've got over 270 volunteers, again, between all of the different community science programs and our city nature challenge. There's a lot of people getting out and having that repeated connection to nature. And it's for all ages. So you'll get a chance to see kind of what that looks like. We do have 181 bluebird nest boxes across the forest preserves now, which we could never do. We could never monitor successfully if it wasn't for all of the volunteers that are out there monitoring weekly. So who can be a community scientist? We've got family groups. We have homeschool groups that are out doing community science projects. We have a couple of different Girl Scout troops that have taken this on as a project. There's one troop in particular that has really latched on to the bat monitoring project and just think it's the greatest thing ever. So they get so excited they get permission to be out in the forest preserve at night with their parents. Aspiring scientists. So we have a number of college students, Rock Valley students in particular, and Rockford University students that are interested in doing field biology and think this is a good way to start learning the ropes and collecting real world data that will be used by different scientists. People though that are just avid hikers and they're like, well, I'm out there anyway, and I'd like to understand what's going on around me. And then we have a lot of retirees that can go out and monitor bluebird boxes at 9 a.m. on a Wednesday, or can be out late at night and looking at bats and don't have to worry about going to work the next day. So it's a wide variety of folks that are participating, which I think is part of the fun of it, because the Girl Scouts and the retirees can share their data together. So just to give you an idea of where we monitor, so we are currently monitoring in 39 different preserves of the 44 that the forest preserve has, which is really exciting. And we actually will be adding Thunderbird, which is right next to this big number 28 next to Severson Dells. It's pretty much that entire terrain, kind of pyramid shape, or not pyramid, but trapezoid shape. And so there's lots of space out there to explore and see what's out there. So when we monitor, this is a wide range. It just depends on the monitoring programs. So we have our calling frogs that start as early as late February and early March. Then we have obviously late spring and summer. There's a number of different programs going. And all the way through late fall, we'll be doing bats and some of the phenology projects well into October, November, and even early December. Each program, you're monitoring for different lengths. So sometimes it's once a month, sometimes it's every week. Again, depending on the species you're monitoring for. And the monitoring sessions are usually 1 to 3 hours, again, depending on your location. So what site you're monitoring and what species you're looking for. So the different projects that we have are bats, bluebirds, bumblebees, BudBurst, which is phenology, which we'll talk a little bit more about what that is in a minute, and then calling frogs, and our Inaturalist project. So bats, Barbara Williams, who many of you guys are familiar with, started doing this kind of on her own a few years ago. And then right after I started in this position at Severson, there was an Illinois bat working group that was formed actually out of a project with IDOT. So there was an Illinois Department of Transportation monitoring project, and Joe Caff, who's the endangered species manager for Illinois Department of Natural Resources, was part of that and really interested in getting more people collecting bat data. And everybody was a little bit interested in trying to figure out, okay, how can we be collecting data the same? So the first tool is actually this amazing little microphone that attaches to an iPod or an iPad. And there's an app that goes with it that will tell you what species of bats you are listening to or seeing if it's still light enough. So you go out about a half hour after dark, late spring to early fall, And once a month or more, again, I think more and more people have gotten excited about bats. So we have a couple of monitors that are coming every week. If the bat pack is available, they're checking it out. We had somebody that just dropped it off last Thursday who called this morning like, hey, can I have it again for this week? And I said, yeah, it's not checked out, so you go for it. So people are generally really excited. Populations, as many of you are aware, have been on the decline between white nose syndrome and a couple of other different fungal diseases. They're having a hard time of it. Little is known about a number of our bat species, and so the more we can learn about their distribution and frequency, hopefully we can learn a little bit more about their habitat, more details about their habitat requirements, and what we can do to better support their populations. All right, so somebody that's moderately comfortable with technology, again, it's an iPad or an iPod Touch with an app and a speaker that goes with it, and it's pretty simple. We do have Jillian, our AmeriCorps member, and Andrea Wallace-Noble, who's one of our naturalists, who are more than happy to go out with you to show you how everything works. You can also go out with another monitor as kind of a peer mentoring opportunity as well. And people that are comfortable being out in the forest preserves at night. So we obviously recommend that people aren't out there by themselves. So we recommend people going in small groups, but obviously you want to be quiet while you're out there monitoring as well, so you're not disturbing the bats. So here's what the app looks like on the screen. So it actually shows you a little bit of a graph of the call. And using those sound patterns, it'll identify the species of bat. And what's actually really neat is Inaturalist has just figured out a way for you to be able to upload the screenshots and the audio recordings into Inaturalist so that people can help you confirm the identification in there as well, which is the technology behind it, like my mom, it's really exciting. And we've actually been finding that some of the calls that the app identifies as a certain species of bat, there are bat biologists that are saying, nope, that pattern actually doesn't indicate that it's that bat. So having that second set of confirmation of the data is really, really helpful. So a little bit about the bat data from this year. So we've got 1,750 observations of 9 different species across 13 different preserves. Big brown bat is our most common. We've got hoary bats, silver-haired bats. A couple of years ago, we've had Indiana bats and gray bats as well, which are both listed species as well. So we know that the species exist. And we want to continue monitoring them so we can hopefully help improve their habitat. Bluebirds. So there are a number of nest boxes at certain preserves. So monitors usually work in pairs. Some of our preserves have multiple pairs of folks that are monitoring. So Severson actually has four folks that are out monitoring boxes because we have so many. So you are looking at nesting activity. So whether there's a nest that's been built, whether it has eggs, fledglings, and looking for nesting success. So early spring to late summer. This year it's been an especially late summer. I know at Severson they've been out monitoring. I think last week is the last week they went out, which is about a month longer than they normally do. But there were still bluebirds in the boxes. So you go out once a week. And bluebird populations, which were plummeting in the 70s, have been on the rise with the implementation of nest boxes. So many may know that in wetlands, the Natural Land Institute also has bluebird nest boxes, and I think a lot of people on their private properties have boxes as well. I know it's a very popular Boy Scout project to build bluebird nest boxes. So that with support, bluebirds have been doing much better. This is definitely definitely for folks that are comfortable hiking on uneven ground and venturing off trail. Good at doing tick checks because you're definitely going through prairie and going through high grass prairie frequently. So again, this is the longest running project that we have at the forest preserves. And Andrea put this little note in that loves cute fluffy baby birds, because who doesn't love fluffy baby birds? Just a little bit of information. We don't have all of the data in from this year yet. So this is from last year. We had 498 fledglings and 190 boxes across 15 preserves. So we did actually last winter remove a few boxes because there were ones that were damaged. There were ones that hadn't been used, hadn't been documented as being used in years. And we had wrens that were moving in instead. And so we figured we'd clean up a few boxes and make it a little more efficient and supporting where the bluebirds actually are nesting. So you can see we've got bluebirds, fledgling totals 253. We've got tree swallows 160 and chickadees 22 fledglings. Bumblebees, I think this one might be one of my favorites just because you get to learn how to identify bumblebees, which is not something I ever thought I would know how to do just based on striping patterns on their back. So this one's really easy. You take photos of bumblebees, again, using your handy dandy scientific device. You can do your best to identify them and upload them to BeeSpotter. And BeeSpotter is a project of the University of Illinois. And they were trying to figure out the distribution and frequency of different native bees because it was something that just wasn't known in Illinois. So again, late spring to early fall. And most of our bees here are actually ground nesters. They're solitary ground nesters, and so you don't look for traditional hives in the same way most people think about bees. And you can do it once a month or more frequently. BeeSpotter tries to get people to do it as consistently over the course of a season as possible. But they also understand that folks are volunteers. So our bumblebee populations are on the decline, just like we talked about the rusty patch bumblebee. Again, they're really susceptible to pesticides. And as we continue to have our heavy agricultural use in our area, it's going to continue to put stress on these populations. They're important native pollinators. And in terms of monitoring, people that are moderately comfortable with technology, again, just using your smartphone if you have one, or you can use a digital camera and can count to 7. And this will be important when you're looking at the different striping patterns on them. So last year we had 110 observations, 9 species and 9 preserves. And this is a program we would really like to have more volunteers participate in, just because we think that there's a valuable data out there. We just don't have as many volunteers out there collecting this information. So BudBurst is all about phenology. So phenology is the timing of when things happen. So when you think about a plant budding or flowering or leafing out, those are different phases of its life cycle. And so they want to record when that's happening. And why they're doing that is looking at climate change. So this is a year-round project, and it can be any species. So if you have like your favorite oak tree in a preserve, or if you have your favorite oak tree in your front yard, you can document the phenology of that plant. And it's really important because they're noticing the changing timelines and plant phenology is starting to be mismatched with its quote unquote normal seasonality due to climate change. So as things get warmer in the spring, their plants are starting to to bud earlier and flower earlier, which may not line up with the same timing as the pollinators that need that plant and that it needs to be pollinated. And so trying to document that and figure out, okay, well, now what? So we have this information, how do we manage accordingly our public lands if possible? Moderately comfortable with technology. BudBurst is an app on your phone. It's free, and it is a project of the Chicago Botanic Gardens, and that's been going for at least 15 years now, if not longer. So just to kind of give you an idea, here are the different phenophases of different kinds of plants, to give you an idea of the cycles that they are looking for. And this, again, is one of our smallest programs, but I think in light of how evident climate change has been this year, with all of our wildfires and flooding and hurricanes and heavy downpours and the release of the UN International Panel on Climate Change report that came out about a month ago, this data is going to be more important maybe than ever before, so that we can continue to add to the data sets there that is already there established, but really adding more localized data, because we just don't have that information for Northern Illinois in the way that other communities have it. And if we're going to have informed management, we need to have the data to do it. Calling frogs is one of the most fun, because especially if you're an auditory person, I know there are those that are auditory birders, which I commend you. It's not something I've ever been able to do very well. And I think it's amazing for those that can walk in the woods and go, oh yeah, that's of this and that's of that. Call frogs very much the same way. So you can learn how to do all the calling or listen to calling frogs. There's a couple of different training recordings and some quizzes, auditory quizzes you can do to learn how to listen to and identify frog calls, to record your findings. And this is the one that starts really early. So it's a half hour after dark, but it can start as early as late February. And the last monitoring window is in July. So they have these 3-week monitoring windows throughout the spring. Frogs are a really important indicator species for water quality. And they're really sensitive to human disturbance. So whether it's changes in pH, changes in dissolved oxygen, changes in nitrates or phosphates, or even salinity, frogs are really sensitive to all of that, as well as temperature. And this is, again, for folks that are comfortable being out at night. Some of the frogs that we are looking for are wood frogs, chorus frogs, spring peepers, leopards, pickerels, toads, tree frogs, green frogs, and bullfrogs. And so part of what you're monitoring for is whether it's an individual or it's a constant chorus with some overlap. So that one would be a constant chorus, because you've got those two different going back, and some people might categorize it as some overlap, but just to give you an idea of what you're listening for. So you've got your chorus frogs, and then you got your spring peepers. And many people, when they hear this, they think of it as being a bird call, funny enough. So again, we don't have all of our frog data confirmed for this year because it goes straight to Peggy Notobart, and we get all of the collective data back from them at the end of the season. So we should have an idea probably early October. And if you're interested in hearing more about the results, Andrea always does an end of season kind of data wrap up. So if you want to see large scale what the data looks like for 2021 across all the projects, it's usually pretty fascinating. And then Inaturalist, this is kind of the catch-all for everything else. And so you can take photos or record sounds of plants, fungus, animals, mosses, etc., and you upload them to Inaturalist. And just like I talked about earlier, you don't have to know what you're looking at, which is the genius of it. It makes it really, really easy. And if you want to learn how to identify, this is a really good way to upload things that you've seen and get confirmation of their identification. When this can happen anytime you want, which is the beauty of it. And Inaturalist, this started out as a graduate project, or not even it was a project between two graduate students. One was a student at Stanford and one was a student at UC Berkeley. And they were just nature nerds, and one was a computer nerd, and so they went through and kind of figured out how to set all this up. This is outside of their regular graduate coursework, and Cal Academy of the Sciences in San Francisco saw this and said, we can do something with this. And so they were able to kind of give it a home at Cal Academy, and with that kind of name recognition and the financial support, this project has grown bigger than I think anyone ever thought it could. So it establishes a baseline for information on species. We actually set up what's called a geofence. So it goes around the different preserves in Winnebago County. So anytime anybody uploads data into Inaturalist, those data points all get collected into one project so that we have access to all of that data, which for our land managers is a great tool so that they can have informed resource management. Because for the forest preserves, they've got 4 full-time natural resource staff and a few seasonals and 11,500 acres of property to manage. And so the more data they can have to inform their management, the easier it is for them to decide how and where to prioritize. So again, moderately comfortable with technology. It's an app. If you don't have a smartphone, you can use a digital camera, and there's a website that makes it really easy, and you can do bulk uploads, so you don't have to do one photo at a time. You can bulk upload all of them at once, and there's lots of videos on how to do all of it. And you can also call us because we're happy to help as well. So total observations, we've got just over 13,000 observations, and I think this is just for this year. And part of it is because of a project that Don mentioned in the beginning called City Nature Challenge. And this is a project that started out as an LA versus San Francisco kind of fun competition 6 years ago now. And they did it for the first year and said, hey, this was kind of fun. Like, we think we can get more people interested in doing this. And so now it has become an international competition where different areas compete with different areas of similar population size. So we are the Rock River Valley area. So it's Boone, Winnebago, Ogle, Stevenson, and DeKalb counties are the 5 counties that are in our area. And so we're competing with other folks of our size that have a similar population. And so the idea is to go out and make observations on absolutely everything. So rolling over a dead log is a great place to start because you can get the fungus and the mosses and the insects and the actual tree itself. And so it's great because you look at the total observations, you're looking at the different species. And then you actually go back the next week and help identify species. And so it's a great way internationally to do a big international BioBlitz, which is fascinating. And it's a huge amount of data that can be collected in a really short amount of time. But all of this data is also publicly accessible, which is really helpful for researchers that are now able to do research on a scale like never before. So it's pretty impressive with all of us out there collecting data. We are able to help researchers of all kinds, looking at phenology, looking at distribution. There are researchers that are looking at range shifts due to climate change of different species. And we're able to do science in a way that we've never been able to before. And it's such a great tool, and something as simple as a smartphone is able to inform researchers, land management, climate change policy. So this data is hugely powerful. So if you would like to join us and help collecting data, there is a brief volunteer application. We've got some quick trainings. We do have a couple of Facebook groups, so we have fun sharing our observations immediately with other monitors, and then getting out and monitoring with whatever project you would like. And one thing we will be doing more of next year is having more peer opportunities so that you can go out and monitor with somebody that's more experienced, now that we've got a few years under our belt, and people that have been doing some of these projects for 4 or 5 years are ready to help mentor people that are new to the field. So we're really excited to be able to do this and continue to collect data, and wanting to stretch beyond Winnebago County as much as we can. Again, all that data helping inform management, but also, selfishly helping inform education as well. Because the more we know about our natural world, we can use that data to help educate all the folks that live around us about what's going on. All right. So with that, that was a lot of talking. Do folks have questions? Interested in getting involved?
I'm gonna go ahead and ask everybody to unmute, and if they have questions of Ann, feel free to jump on. I don't see any any questions that showed up in the chat, but if you have a question, feel free to just jump in.
And first, thanks for a great presentation, very informative and lots of great stuff going on. I wonder, like you had mentioned in this, like in the iNaturalist, but like with the city challenge, would the folks that were to do the observations in Stevenson County, would it be possible to isolate those observations as a grouping?
It is, and we're happy to show anybody how to do it, because it's actually really easy to do. iNaturalist has made it really easy for folks to put up what they call geofences. So if you wanted to just have it be any bird observation in Stevenson County, you can do that.
Linda has her hand up. Go ahead, Linda.
Yeah, I'm interested in the iNaturalist. Is there a particular time frame, or are you planning on doing another area-wide count to be in competition? I think, when was that last one?
It was the end of April, and so it's typically
right.
at the end of April every year. It's usually that last weekend in April for observations, and then the first week of May is when you go through and help with identifications. And we will definitely start promoting that. We usually start promoting that just in January, just to get people to get that on their calendar, because it really is a ton of fun. The first year we did it was right after COVID hit, so we started it 2 years ago, and it was like, well, it was raining, and it was maybe a month into COVID, and nobody really knew what they could do, but all of us could go out in a forest preserve by ourselves and take pictures, and it was okay. So I I definitely was able to participate more that first year, because at that point we weren't able to do anything else because the nature center was closed, and it was like, well, I have 4 days to go out and collect as much data as possible. And I was feeling really good about it, and because I just had my phone, not realizing that Andrea and Ellen, 2 of our other naturalists that were also out collecting data, had their phone, but they also had their digital cameras with them. So when it came to number of observations, I was so far ahead of everybody. And then they did the whole bulk upload at the end of the weekend, and I think quadrupled my numbers or something like that. So.
Oh, that's great. So is it it's all year round then? Is that correct?
So iNaturalist is something you can use any time. It's the City Nature Challenge is the kind of international bio blitz, and it's a Friday through Monday, typically the last week in April.
Okay.
But we should be getting the dates here. Usually we get the dates in October. So we'll have a good idea.
So that would be a very easy one for anyone to get involved with. I was just thinking of promoting it in my hiking club. That might be something we could do as a group.
Yep. And that's the beauty of iNaturalist is, again, it's easy because it's just an app and you don't have to know what you're looking at. You can just say, oh, there's a cool mushroom, and take a picture of it. And iNaturalist will suggest an identification for you. And then there'll be those mushroom nerds that will come back and help confirm that ID. Okay. Thank you.
If you can share that, if you can email Don Miller with that information when that comes out in October, and then we'll pass it on. So.
Absolutely. We would love to have as many participants as possible. For those of you that don't know Andrea, Andrea Wallace Noble is a Don Miller protege. She told me my second week on the job that her goal in life was to have my job because she'd been doing education programs with Don since 2nd grade. And she's really competitive, like really, really competitive. And the first year it was all about beating Chicago, which we did. And this last year, the Chicago Wilderness finally picked up City Nature Challenge. And of course, they've got hundreds of members. And so we're able to kick our butts, but didn't lessen the competition any.
And here's a question for you from the group, from Jeff Schreiber, actually. How do you decide upon or choose the subjects of the research and monitoring?
Yeah, so we tried to tap into established programs. We really, because there are so many community science programs out there, we decided we didn't want to start our own. We wanted to contribute to programs that had already started where we could fill in holes. Again, Calling Frog Survey is managed by Peggy Notebart. So they really are looking for frog populations in Illinois and Wisconsin primarily. And they didn't have anybody doing those observations in north central Illinois. They had it in Cook County and Collier counties, but once you got out this far, there wasn't anybody doing those observations. And it's like, well, that's a hole we can fill. And if you really want to see the wide range of community science programs available internationally, there is the Citizen Science Association, which I can actually drop that website in the chat box. They have, there's a citizen science program for everything. For a while, there was a citizen science mapping project for AIDS. So if you were out in a different open map internationally available. And so again, anything, it doesn't be just biology, it can be any number of monitoring projects.
Any other questions out there? I don't see any other hands raised. I'm going to stop the recording.